Good evening. Thanks for joining us. This is NTD Business, and I'm Paul Graney. Fresh off signing the $2 trillion relief bill, President Biden sets his sights on an even larger one, this one to fund infrastructure projects. New real estate agents are flooding the market, but is the pie big enough? Oil prices keep falling on the back of weaker than expected demand. Doesn't mean your gas prices will be cheaper. That and much more coming up on NTD Business. There's a global shortage of semiconductor chips that's reportedly caused by supply chain disruptions and manufacturers committing resources to make higher margin chips for smartphones and other electronics. And that's hurting other industries, including truck makers. Shares in Sweden's AB Volvo fell around 7% today after the company said it's facing a big hit to production in the second quarter. It's estimated Volvo will make 16,000 less trucks over the quarter, potentially costing them over $400 million. Car brands including Ford, Volkswagen, Honda have all suffered hits to production as a result of the shortage. And as we reported last week, it's rumored Ford will move production of a new car from Ohio to Mexico. I talked to Kerry Smith about it. Smith's a successful American entrepreneur and manufacturer. He's now an investor with Unorthodox Ventures. He says he always encourages companies to manufacture their products in the United States or wherever the primary market happens to be. Smith sold his company Big Ass Fans for $500 million after building it from scratch. He agrees for certain products like low to mid-range cars, unions have made labor costs too high in America. Take the Ford example. But it's not the case for all products. I asked him where he's seen real advantage in keeping manufacturing at home.
To be honest with you, the first thing when we look at a company that has a manufactured product, we tell them that we strongly advise that they manufacture in the States. And we always do that. Again, the exception being a situation where if I was just interested in the Israeli market for whatever reason, that I would be manufacturing in Israel. But I think there's much to be gained by that. And so we always there are no situations I can think of where we would say, well, to save a nickel, because that's all you're talking about here. You're talking about people that decide, and I'm not a proponent of this at all, that decide that they want to save a little bit of money, that they want to make a little bit more money, and that's what they do. And I think that's very short-term thinking.
Is there a specific example where you saw that it really gave you an advantage over your competitors?
To manufacture in the States?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Prior to this, I owned a company, Big Ass Fans. We made very large industrial ceiling fans. We also made some personal fans as well. But we made a point of it. And we made a point of telling everybody that we manufactured everything in the States. The only thing that we manufactured outside the States, we had a plant that was our own plant with our own people in Malaysia. And we manufactured for the East. We did a lot of work in Australia, and the fans that went to Australia either came from the U.S. or from Malaysia. But everything we did in the States. As a matter of fact, our suppliers, and I want to say about 80% of our suppliers were within 70, 80 miles of the main manufacturing plant that was in Lexington, Kentucky. And the reason for that is very simple, is quality control. And the fact that if we decided we wanted to change a design on Monday afternoon, I mean, we could have changed that, by Friday, and everything was right there. Very convenient.
There's lots of people who say that America is overregulated. It's not hospitable for manufacturers. Have you found that?
Well, typically regulation stems from your competitors or your would-be competitors. And by that I mean that it typically comes from other manufacturers that are trying to stifle the market, stifle innovation in the market. And in order to do that, they lobby the government. And so ultimately, it comes from your competition. In essence, I mean, competition writ large. You may not have been in business. You may not have even been born when these regulations came down. But normally, that's where it starts because they have an advantage. The manufacturer has an advantage, and they want to keep it. And the way they keep it is they start writing laws and comments and passing them along to their senators and legislatures and so forth. And that's how this sort of thing happens. So you could say that, but I don't know that this country is so regulated that you couldn't or shouldn't manufacture here. I mean, your options are, I mean, if that drives everything, then I suppose you should go to China, but that's not even the case. I mean, if you look to manufacture in Europe, Europe's very difficult as well. It's a little bit more regulated, well, a lot more regulated in many ways than the States. But as I say, it's what we concentrated on when we manufacture is quality. And I think that quality is something, regardless of where you are, regardless of what you're doing, that quality outs. People appreciate quality. And as long as people understand that it costs more to do that, and it does cost more. I mean, it costs more to manufacture in the States. It just does. But the advantages that you have, I think, far outweigh the cost. I mean, it's not that much.
Really interesting insights. Kerry Smith, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate your time.
And right on the heels of the virus relief bill, the Biden administration is already working on a new $3 trillion package on infrastructure and, quote, domestic needs. But some are now asking how they plan to pay for it. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more details from D.C.
The Biden administration now working with Congress on a new large spending bill to fund things like infrastructure, universal pre-K, free community college, and paid family leave. The White House hasn't released any specific details or an estimated price tag for how much it could cost, but some news outlets are expecting the price to exceed $3 trillion. Democrats say they want a bipartisan bill, but some are aiming to push it through without any Republican support.
We Democrats, all of us, believe we need big, bold change.
Like the virus relief package, Democrats would have to use a budget process called reconciliation to get around the filibuster. Republicans are concerned this new spending proposal, along with the latest virus relief package, would be paid for through tax hikes.
Is this being proposed, these tax increases, to offset the costs of the recently enacted partisan stimulus package, ma'am?
No, the stimulus package, the American Rescue Plan, was not funded with any increases in taxes, but a longer-term plan that addresses critical needs of this economy probably would be accompanied by some revenue raisers.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying changes to tax policy will help pay for the programs on infrastructure.
Striving to produce legislation whose Washington tax grabs will have enormous harmful consequences for working families and Main Street businesses.
He and other congressional Republicans were supposed to join a hearing in the House's chief tax writing committee, but he announced Republicans wouldn't join because he expected there would be no meaningful dialogue on crucial issues like infrastructure.
Today's hearing is nothing more than another partisan exercise so the Democrat House leadership can set up yet another multi-trillion-dollar, one-sided spending bill.
And Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says that when the bill is considered on the House and Senate floors, Democrats will likely say that it's to fund highways, but at the same time be packed with liberal policies such as funding for the Green New Deal. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And businesses in New York are considering leaving the city over high taxes. At least 20 companies already plan on moving to Florida. NTD's Jasmina Davis reports.
Top New York firms are considering leaving the city over a possible tax hike. Many have already left, including Case Capital Advisors.
It was absolutely driven by not only my new opportunity, but also driven by what I viewed as an insane tax structure in New York State and only getting worse.
This is happening as politicians propose $7 billion in new state taxes. New York is already one of the most tax-burdened states in the nation.
We'd raised our children in New York, right? I'd spent 40 years there. I participated in the whole New York lifestyle. But then when Trump was in office and they passed that tax reform act, a lot of the big blue states got whacked in terms of deductibility of very high taxes.
One destination for many firms is Florida. Many want to move either part of their companies or their entire companies there, including Goldman Sachs and hedge fund Citadel and Elliott Management. Florida real estate firms seem pretty happy about this.
It's one of the most tax-friendly states, and the tax benefits of Florida, they just go on and on and on.
Florida residents don't pay a statewide income tax, only federal rates. New York's governor, on the other hand, wants to raise New York City's top rate to 14.7%, the highest in the nation on top of state taxes.
I'm seeing a lot of executives in a lot of the companies that I'm working with. A lot of them are moving there. Florida has an unbelievably high quality of life. It's like being on a vacation every single day. The weather's gorgeous.
Even JetBlue, founded in New York back in the 1990s, is considering shifting a number of headquarter roles to Florida. JetBlue said in a memo to staff it'll have a final plan later this year. Jasmina Davis, NTD News.
More than 250 New York business leaders have signed a letter to Governor Cuomo challenging the need for state tax increases. Leaders include the heads of financial companies like JP Morgan Chase, Blackstone, and even big publisher Condé Nast. And a new study shows that the top 1% of earners fail to report over a fifth of their income to the IRS. It's a far higher level than tax evasion than previously thought. By comparison, it says the bottom half failed to report about 7% of their income. The researchers estimate the top 1% of earners owe 36% of unpaid federal income taxes. The study was a joint effort between the IRS researchers and academics, and they found that random IRS audits underestimate how much people cheat on their taxes. It's because these audits couldn't detect some sophisticated schemes like offshore accounts or pass-through businesses. And in the red-hot U.S. housing market, home prices aren't the only thing going up. There's now more realtors than there were houses for sale in the United States. NTD's Phil Zoe has the story.
Real estate agents outnumber houses for sale by nearly 500,000. If you can't find a property, at least you can find a good agent to help you find that property. In January, there were only 1 million homes for sale, the lowest housing inventory since the 1980s. That's down 26% compared to the year before. But membership at the National Association of Realtors grew by 5%, up to 1.5 million realtors.
Life is short. When am I going to do this? Now is the time.
Lauren Hurwitz was in media relations, working for big names like Martha Stewart and Amazon. She lost her job in the pandemic but wasted no time getting a new one in real estate.
Sure. So what we're seeing in the market right now is a continuation of pure craziness. There's no inventory or very low inventory, and there's such demand for buying.
Hurwitz just got her license last summer, but she's already closed one deal with 3 more in contract.
I think doing it full time is really important. I have clients calling me at all hours of the day, and you have to be able to stop, drop, and roll for them. And you have to genuinely want to stop, drop, and roll.
Diana Dorel Gutierrez started real estate a year ago in Arizona.
There's amazing miracles that can happen when you go all in.
She's closed 5 deals for buyers and just got her first listing from a seller.
If you have a fire in your belly and you have a genuine desire to be of service, I think it's a great industry to be in.
But most new agents, unlike Hurwitz and Gutierrez, make little to no money in the beginning. In 2019, realtors with less than 2 years of experience only made a median income of $9,000 from real estate. The NAR says its members have a 15% turnover rate. So be prepared to work hard if you're thinking about selling some real estate. Phil Zhou, NTD News, New York.
And Citigroup has declared Zoom-free Fridays. It's also encouraging employees to limit calls outside work hours. The move is to fight remote working fatigue during the pandemic. In a memo to employees, Citi CEO Jane Fraser says the lines between home and work have been blurred and has taken a toll on well-being. She says it's not sustainable. The memo says any internal meetings on Fridays would happen as audio calls only. She also encouraged employees to take vacations while the company announced a firm-wide holiday on May 28th. The firm also says post-pandemic, a majority of the roles at the bank would be hybrid. And stocks closed lower today, giving up their gains from yesterday. The Dow fell 308 points, 0.94%. S&P 500 was down 30 points, 0.76%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq dropped 150 points, or 1.12%. Drug maker AstraZeneca fell 3.5% after U.S. authorities said its vaccine trial data may have included outdated information, which may impact its efficacy. GameStop fell 6.5% at around $182 still. The company reported earnings today after hours and fell short of revenue estimates, as if that really matters for the stock price. U.S. crude oil dropped over 6% to less than $58 a barrel, pulling energy companies lower as well. And so oil continues its descent. WTI down nearly 7% today. Daniel LaCalle wrote the book, The Energy World is Flat. He's also the chief economist at the Tresses hedge fund, which has $6 billion of assets under its management. Asked him why the fall is significant.
The first thing that we have to remember is that there was a very aggressive commitment from OPEC plus Russia, not just to maintain the supply cuts that were agreed a few years ago, but to increase them. And Saudi Arabia committed to a further cut in production. So we have seen a very aggressive management of supply. At the same time, we had seen an improvement in demand, particularly from Asia, that was tightening the market quite rapidly. However, in less than 2 months, the market has gone from a curve that was in backwardation, which is bullish, to a curve in contango, which shows that probably the demand picture is much weaker than what most of the producers expected. And I think that it has very significant implications both on the commodity complex, but on the finances of the producing countries. Because think about it, if in an environment in which we have the largest supply cuts seen in many years, with an additional commitment from Saudi Arabia to reduce supply, in which the United States has been reducing production because the shale industry has been managing its supply as well, and in which you had a very rapid recovery of demand. Suddenly, oil prices fall so quickly. I think that the demand picture and the expectations of improvement of demand that the IEA and other international bodies had in their estimates might be a little too optimistic.
You might hear lots of consumers say, well, at least the price of my gasoline, the price of my energy will be cheaper. Is this not the case?
Well, in the United States, there is almost a direct correlation between the household bill of energy prices and the price of the commodity that we look in our screens on a daily basis. However, in important countries of the European Union that are big importers of oil, the impact on households is very limited, because the price of gasoline has such a high component of taxes that changes in the commodity make very little difference for the final consumer. And because usually what governments tend to do is that when prices fall, when the price of oil falls in the market, they increase taxes, and when the price increases, they don't decrease taxes. So If you think about, for example, the vast majority of Eurozone economies, gasoline prices have up to 50, 60% taxes. So consumers don't see a lot of benefit from this reduction in oil prices.
Incredible. I never realized this about Europe. It's like an old-fashioned planned economy. Daniel, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Looks like many automakers are staking their futures on more sales of electric vehicles. But are consumers really ready to buy them? NTD's Evelyn Lee reports.
When Steve Bach recently replaced his old car, he considered and then dismissed the idea of buying an electric vehicle. The reason was simple.
They're too pricey right now.
Instead, Bach settled on a Subaru Outback, which runs on gasoline. He's not alone. Surveys show buyers think electric vehicles, or EVs, cost too much and there aren't enough charging stations.
It's a market that has a lot of attention, has a lot of growth potential, but to date really hasn't accounted for very many sales in the U.S.
EVs now make up less than 2% of new vehicle sales in the United States. It could pose a significant risk for the largest automakers. They're spending billions on new electric vehicles, but what if consumers reject EVs for many years to come?
It's the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, I think, that are going to be the trying times for the manufacturers because of this large investment that's been made. You're rolling out a lot of models that you just don't know how consumers are going to respond to. And
GM even announced a goal of ending gasoline and diesel-fueled passenger vehicles entirely by 2035. Yet for that to happen, they'll need to sell the idea to people like Steve Bach, whose other car is a 1965 Ford Mustang. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
Still to come. Attention Lego fans, the company is releasing a new set and it's out of this world. So what is it? And business groups in Germany warn that more companies may face bankruptcy if the country extends its lockdown. That and more after the break. One 150 human rights groups want Airbnb to drop its sponsorship of next year's Olympic Games in China. It's over the regime's human rights abuses. Airbnb is one of the top sponsors of the International Olympic Committee, or IOC. The coalition is targeting Airbnb specifically because it claims to have a socially responsible business model. The group argues the company is trying to increase tourism in China at the expense of Uyghur and Tibetan rights. Human rights groups say the IOC told them it has to stay politically neutral and it won't move the games out of China. And Germany is extending its lockdown. It says it's trying to break a third wave of CCP virus cases, but local business groups warn it'll lead to even more bankruptcies for industries that are already struggling. NTD's Patrick Hayden reports.
Germany's extending its lockdown until April 18th. Lobby groups say this could drive more businesses into bankruptcy. The president of one retail association said, "After 1 year with coronavirus, the situation for many retailers is desperate. There is no longer any hope of surviving this crisis economically." Tourism and auto associations also criticised the extended lockdown, warning of bankruptcies in their industries as well. But Germans on the street had mixed reactions.
We have a problem with the pandemic and we must fight it together somehow. We have to pull ourselves together.
Another passerby disagrees.
There are all those measures, but they don't get us anywhere. As you can see, 1 year later, we're still in the same situation.
The extended lockdown means citizens can't go on vacation in their own country, but they can travel abroad. One holiday apartment owner says the rules don't make sense.
You can't be better protected than in a holiday apartment, and yet it's okay to fly to Mallorca if you're tested? But you can't stay in a Bavarian holiday apartment or elsewhere in Germany, even with a test? It's simply incomprehensible what's going on right now.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel says new CCP virus variants are more infectious, and carriers are infectious for a longer period of time. Merkel says things are tough for longer than expected, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
It's been 1 year since the UK government started its first lockdown, forcing pubs and restaurants and so-called non-essential businesses to close. NTD's Joy Duguid brings us the latest.
It's now 1 year since the UK started its first lockdown. In Britain, almost 10,000 premises, including pubs, restaurants and nightclubs, were forced to close permanently. One large pub owner in Derbyshire has managed to weather the storm so far.
I mean, we've been abreast of the news, so we knew that things were starting to get bad. It still never felt like a shutdown was coming. And yeah, the realisation, kind of brutal. And we thought weeks, not months, not a year.
4.7 million people lost their jobs and have been forced to rely on the government's furlough scheme.
So it's been like 15, 20 years of building this business up to what it is now. And we have 68 staff, I think, on furlough currently. But the team's bigger than that still, if we take in the sort of students that come back in the summer. And yeah, it's kind of been brutal.
Britain has one of the fastest vaccine rollouts in the world. And health ministers said on Saturday that half the country's adults had been inoculated. That will go some way in providing hope to the hospitality industry, in getting businesses up and running again.
Lego's new set is out of this world. The toy company is releasing a model of the Discovery Shuttle and Hubble Space Telescope. This created in partnership with NASA to mark the 40th anniversary of the first space shuttle flight on April 12, 1981. The set costs about $200 and has more than 2,300 pieces. It features realistic details like opening payload bay, retractable landing gear, and 5 seats for the crew. The new set will be available on April 1st. That's the latest business updates for today. You can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, it's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.